What if the real story of World War I was never told through battlefield victories or glorious flags? What if it was told through mud-soaked boots, torn flesh, and the 1,000-yard stare? Of boys forced to kill strangers for reasons they didn't understand. This wasn't a war of heroes and villains. It was a slow, industrialized slaughter, designed not to win, but to bleed.
Shadow Force presents.
To enter the trench was to leave the world behind. There was no glory here, no cheering crowds, just the endless stench of rotting corpses, damp earth, and human waste. Soldiers called it the front, but it might as well have been the edge of the world. Stretching from the Belgian coast to the Swiss border, the Western Front was carved into the earth like a scar. It was divided into frontline trenches, support trenches, and reserve trenches, linked by communication paths. But in truth, no part was safe. Imagine waking up with rats chewing on your boots, or watching a comrade get sucked into mud so deep it buried him alive. Soldiers stood for hours in freezing water, their feet rotting into what became known as trench foot. Lice swarmed through their clothes. Disease was as deadly as the bullets. Meals? Often just cold, canned meat, or hard biscuits infested with insects. Bathrooms were a plank suspended over a pit, exposed to enemy fire. Sleep came in 20-minute shifts between shellings. And the rain. Always the rain. Soldiers wrote home not about victory, but about the mud that swallowed everything. There is no sound like artillery. The screaming whistle of incoming shells, the deafening thunder as they exploded overhead, and the choking clouds of dust that followed. For hours, even days, the bombardment never stopped. It broke bones, it shattered minds. This was the birth of what we now call shell shock, a mental trauma few understood at the time. Soldiers twitched uncontrollably. Some screamed until their voices disappeared. Others simply stared, paralyzed, lost inside themselves. And yet, they were often labeled as cowards, court-martialed, even executed. Then came the gas. The Germans introduced chlorine gas in 1915, and it quickly escalated into one of the war's most feared weapons. Yellow-green clouds rolled silently across the battlefield. It didn't explode. It didn't make noise. It just killed. Soldiers gasped for air, clawing at their throats, their lungs burning from the inside out. Mustard gas followed, causing blisters, blindness, and slow, painful death. Gas masks helped, but were crude and often useless in chaos. There was no safe way to fight something that crept silently through the air you breathe. When the whistle blew, men climbed out of the trench and into no man's land. A barren, corpse-littered stretch of mud, barbed wire and craters. They walked into machine guns, artillery and death. Most didn't make it 10 yards. Attacks were often planned by generals miles away, relying on maps and outdated assumptions. Entire regiments were wiped out in hours. Progress was measured in feet, paid for in lives. One soldier later wrote, "We went over with 600 men. Only 74 came back, and we didn't even take the hill." Despite the horror, strange moments of humanity endured. Christmas 1914 saw a spontaneous ceasefire where British and German soldiers left their trenches, shook hands, and played football. For one brief moment, they were not enemies, just men. But the war resumed, more brutal than ever. Still, soldiers wrote poetry. They sketched the view from their dugouts. They told jokes to keep from crying. In a world of senseless death, preserving your soul became the only act of resistance left. Rats were the most common companions. Some grew the size of cats feasting on corpses, but there were also mascots, dogs, goats, even monkeys, kept for morale. Horses died by the millions pulling wagons in mud. Carrier pigeons delivered life-saving messages. In such unnatural conditions, soldiers clung to anything that reminded them of home, sanity, or life before the war. Even the ridiculous, a trench pet, a lucky sock, a photograph, could mean survival. When soldiers returned home, many were unrecognizable. Not just physically, but mentally. Those who suffered from shell shock were often dismissed or shamed. Families couldn't comprehend what they'd seen. Governments were slow to offer care. Many veterans lived in poverty or addiction. In Britain and France, memorials were built. In Germany, bitterness festered. In the US, it was often just silence. This was not a generation that came home victorious. They came home broken and largely forgotten. This was not a war of strategy. It was a war of attrition. Who could outlast the bleeding? Machine guns, barbed wire, artillery, and poison gas turned the battlefield into a mechanized killing machine. Human life was simply a number to be moved, sacrificed, or ignored. The Western Front barely moved for 4 years, but 20 million lives were lost. Not because one side fought smarter, but because both were willing to grind men into dust for the illusion of progress. Was it bravery or insanity? The trench wasn't just a battlefield. It was a symbol of failed diplomacy, of technological power outrunning morality, of soldiers used as pawns by distant politicians. The same dynamic still exists today. Modern warfare may look cleaner: drones, satellites, airstrikes. But the same questions remain. Who fights? Who profits? Who dies? The trenches teach us not just about war, but about what happens when truth is buried deeper than the dead.
If you believe military history shaped our world, then you've already joined the force. Hit like, subscribe, and share the mission. Shadow Force continues, and the next chapter awaits.